Now, will President Trump plan to strengthen the American economy? His plan to do so work? And how are the tariffs he announced to the panel in Davos different from the targeted tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico? Joining me now to discuss these developments is Douglas Holtz-Eakin, president of the American Action Forum. Doug Holtz-Eakin, thank you very much for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
Now, President Trump on Thursday virtually addressed the World Economic Forum with his plan for taxes, tariffs, lower energy costs, and lower interest rates. I want to play a clip for you and get your response.
My message to every business in the world is very simple. Come make your product in America, and we will give you among the lowest taxes of any nation on earth. We're bringing them down very substantially, even from the original Trump tax cuts. But if you don't make your product in America, which is your prerogative, then very simply you will have to pay a tariff, differing amounts, but a tariff which will direct hundreds of billions of dollars and even trillions of dollars into our treasury to strengthen our economy and pay down debt.
Doug, how was this message received at the panel, and what's your response?
Well, I think certainly it was received with a fair amount of disappointment and dismay in some cases by countries around the globe. If you go back 10, 15, 20 years, the United States would have gone to a comparable forum and been advocating for lower barriers to trade, greater unification of global markets, and this is something going in the other direction. So I don't think it's surprising that it's viewed with some dismay by other countries. It's also not necessarily going to work exactly as the president described. Certainly, some companies may be able to do exactly as he described. But if it were the case that everybody tried to do what he said, there wouldn't be enough workers. We only have a 4% unemployment rate. We need 20 million more people. So not everyone can do that, and it's not going to play out that way. And one of the byproducts of this is going to be higher prices for American consumers. That's what those tariffs are. That's not going to be uniformly popular. The other byproduct will be that the dollar will probably appreciate. That's a fairly standard reaction to a big across-the-board tariff, and that makes things harder for our exporters. So like most things in economics, nothing's exactly free, and there's no free lunch here either. There are going to be some downsides as well.
Well, Trump says he tends to disagree with the statement that it'll raise prices through tariffs will raise prices here at home. Rather, it would encourage investment. What do you say to that?
Well, there's two responses. One, many people have looked back at the experience under the tariffs he imposed when he was first president, and they have found that not 100% of the time and not 100%, but by and large, they were passed through to consumers as higher prices. So that's been the historical experience. The other thing is he's actually counting on consumers paying higher prices, because if they don't, they're not going to change what they do. They'll continue to buy the imports. They're not going to switch to a domestic manufactured good. And he wants people to want domestic manufactured goods. That's the incentive to come and locate here. So again, you can't have it both ways. You have to recognize that, yeah, if you want people to be here, part of the cost is higher prices for consumers.
Now, tariffs on China, Canada, Mexico expected to rise. How are these policies expected to affect inflation and the global economy more broadly?
I think that the China, Canada, Mexico are a little different character. An across-the-board tariff is literally the United States directed toward the rest of the world and the attempt to advantage the U.S. These are negotiating tactics. I mean, he wants China to change its behavior. That was certainly the intent in 2018-19. He's openly said that he would like to use these 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico as a way to reopen the United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement and get better terms, particularly for auto industry in the United States. And so these are strategic tariffs that may or may not go into place depending on what happens to the negotiations that follow after that.
And the U.S. also has a large deficit with China, and Canada, has. There's the tariffs are a response to that as well, I've heard. Do you think that with China, at least, do you think the tariffs would help kind of balance things out? He's calling for more of a fair trade balance with China.
Again, it sounds great on paper. Turns out that was the goal back in 2018-19, and it didn't really work. It didn't change China's behavior very much. It didn't change the trade deficit we have with China. So I'm a little bit skeptical that it will look different this time around. And certainly with Canada and Mexico, those are now our largest trading partners. And there are some real downsides to those tariffs taken at face value. For example, we no longer import a lot of oil from Saudi Arabia. It comes from Canada. And those imported oil will go right into every product, especially gasoline. And a 25% increase in the cost of gasoline is not something people like.
Now, Trump also said that he would, quote, demand that interest rates drop immediately. How much power does a president have on interest rates? And could there be a ripple effect if this does go through of interest rates dropping all over the world?
If the United States cuts interest rates, it places pressure on interest rates around the globe. So the real issue is what happens to the United States. I don't think that the Federal Reserve is going to listen in particular to that speech and change how it thinks about the outlook for growth and inflation. It's going to do what it thinks is best for those two things. And all of the forecasts that I've seen show more likely higher growth in 2025. That's good news. Potentially higher inflation as well. That's the bad news. Neither says cut rates further. So it doesn't look like that's immediately in the offing.
Doug Holtz-Eakin, thank you very much for your insight here today.
Thanks for having me.